Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we've seen, possibly against my better judgment,
Yes.
Joker, Folie à Deux. The sequel to Joker, which came out in 2019, which I hated so much. You loved. The sequel is a musical, and this is the interesting thing about it. Supposedly it came from an idea of Joaquin Phoenix's. He plays the Joker. Arthur Fleck is his given name in this. Normally he doesn't really have a name. While he was playing Joker in the first film, he said he had a dream where he was on stage as Joker performing songs, and that kind of became this idea for a sequel. The first one was never intended to have a sequel. It was never the idea. Then it made $1 billion, and one became quite a good idea for the studio. And, I was thinking about this even before we saw it, like Megalopolis. Like, what a film that takes swings is kind of one thing that I referred to Megalopolis as. And what is this if not a film that takes big swings?
Absolutely.
So
are you glad you saw it?
Yeah, I think it's much better than the first one, although that is very faint praise because I hated the first one so much. But all I'd heard about this before I saw it was bad things. People hated it, and I don't think it's a great film. I don't even think it's a very good film, but I think it's kind of interesting. And it's surprising. It's surprising how well the musical aspects work.
I feel ambivalent about it because I think fundamentally the film doesn't work, right? Or what it's trying to do is so stupid. I mean, in a commercial film, it's grandiose, but it's stupid because, it takes the genre that is all about utopia, making you feel great, conveying feeling, right? And it turns it into its opposite, right? It's, so it's a film that, takes on Laura Mulvey's dictum to destroy pleasure, really. that is, I think, what the goal of the film is. It's kind of, spoiler, it's a musical in which the protagonist gets shot at the end. Yeah. And it's all about loss and psychotic states of mind and...
Gets stabbed at the end.
Stabbed, yeah. Sorry. So on the one hand, you feel it's very daring, but on the other hand, it's like, it shouldn't be any surprise that the film is a flop. Though, I think also there's a difference between it being a financial flop and it being very interesting. And I do think it's very interesting.
Yeah, so in terms of it being a flop, it's supposed to have cost something like $200 million. And it's worldwide, it's taken $120 million so far, which is much more than I'd heard. Or maybe people are talking about the opening day or something, but it's who knows what will happen. I'm not sure that it's on track to get $1 billion back.
No.
But not as big a flop as was initially led to believe.
Yes, they said that it needs about 450 to break even.
We'll see.
And we'll see. But anyway, I don't care. I thought it was kind of like a very, very daring experiment because, it begins with a Looney Tunes cartoon of the Joker.
Yeah, Looney Tunes style.
Yeah, cartoon.
Yeah. Which recaps essentially the climactic scene at the end of the first film where Arthur Fleck as the Joker goes onto the Murray, I can't remember his name, Murray something show, which is the Robert De Niro character, has the piss taken out of him and shoots him in the head. And that was it was a really amazing scene. I didn't like so much about that first one, but that was a really astonishing scene.
Yes.
And you were really on his side, which was kind of crazy. And it was very surprising and very impactful. And so the opening of this shows you that in a cartoon form, and it gives you this idea of the Joker being separate from Arthur Fleck. So as he walks into stage, his shadow is not cooperating. His shadow is taking the stardom. His shadow is taking the photos and everything. And then his shadow takes over him. So the shadow puts on the clown makeup, the shadow puts on his clothes, the shadow goes on stage and does everything, and then takes it all off and puts it back on Arthur when the police come. So Arthur is the one who gets the blame. And so this film was all about him being in Arkham Asylum. I think it's Arkham Asylum. Do they ever say it? But it's certainly...
Yeah, they do. They have the sign.
It is, all right. In Arkham Asylum, and he's going to go on trial, trying to lodge an insanity defence, saying that he has dissociative personality disorder. He and the Joker are two separate people, and that is what may get him off these 5 murders that he's committed.
I thought the Looney Tunes cartoon was a kind of a metaphor for the film, right? Because I thought the idea was brilliant, but actually the cartoon itself wasn't. Right? If you think of those original kind of Looney Tunes cartoons, like, you know, they were so glossy and they moved so well, right? And they were so smart, like intelligent, like hyper intelligent, right? And they did dazzling visual things with movement and and this feels like a computer generated version of a Looney Tunes cartoon. So the idea of starting off with a cartoon is so fantastic, right? It kind of thrilled me. Just the sight of the Looney Tune thing, you know, I thought, wow, right, it's great. And then you actually see the cartoon itself, and you find yourself measuring it to the original and finding it wanting.
I know what you mean. Although I think that the presence, the fact that it starts with this cartoon, immediately proved to me that I was kind of in the right mood for this film. Because I think if I was not in the right mood for this film, I would immediately have found it incredibly patience testing. You know what I mean? I think there may have been a day on which, you know, I would have really hated a lot of this film, but I just didn't today. And I think part of it is expectation lowering, having seen the first, having got a sense of what the characters are going to be doing, what they're like, and what the cinematography is going to look like. And part of it is having heard so many people hate it, thinking, okay, well, if even they hate it, my expectations could not be lower, you know, because they like the first one.
I mean, you know, my test always is, do I look at my watch? No, I didn't look at my watch, right? I do think it's very daring, because, I mean, so much of the film is really, well, it's a musical, right? It absolutely is a musical. It's got I don't know how many numbers, really. And it's kind of like a musical that is constantly flitting between states of consciousness, right? So, you know, this guy in prison, something happens, and all of a sudden in his mind he's the Joker. Arthur Fleck, is it?
Arthur Fleck.
Fleck, yeah. And all of a sudden he's the Joker, and he's dreaming, right? Or, you know, or he's singing, or he's in love, or he finds connection, and it's like these musical numbers are a brighter, more intense, realm, a feeling that offer kind of a ray of hope, a survival kind of dimension to, you know, what is actually occurring on screen. But if you look at the narrative arc of the, you know, both the first film and this one, you know, this is a man who's been mistreated, you know, who's got an illness, right, his laugh, who's dependent on the state to get his medication, who then is constantly abused, right, who loses it and then ends up in prison, and then by the end of this film, he's killed. Like, you couldn't get a darker story, right, in the middle of, you know, all of these kind of musical interludes. So the musical interludes offer, you know, this realm of feeling, but ultimately it's fantasy, and you get brought back to kind of the shitty world you live in that offers not a single fucking ray of hope.
It doesn't feel very Jokery, does it? By which I mean the comic book character. I mean, you know, one thing that you pointed out when we saw the first one is that he's not intelligent. The Joker is very intelligent. He's also mad and all the rest of it, and unpredictable. But he's smart, and he can outsmart the Bat and everything. And here, you know, in the first film and here, he's not smart. One character even calls him low IQ at one point, and it's like a meaningful insult. And you know, the idea of the Joker in any other film or comic or what have you being explained as, you know, a man who suffered trauma as a child, and the state didn't provide, and, you know, the social safety net wasn't there, and so on. You just can't imagine that being like an explanation for the Joker. The Joker is particularly psychopathic, and like he's just if this film would make sense as a man named Arthur Fleck who plays a clown, you know, it's like the connection to the source material is very thin.
Very thin. And actually, so that's one of the things that I find interesting. So those two things. It is theoretically a superhero film, because the Joker, though he doesn't really have any superpowers, he has his own superpowers, his intelligence, and, you know, the threat that he presents, and, you know, the lengths he's willing to go. Like in a comic book, he'd be out of prison in a nanosecond. He'd have some lackeys in a helicopter or something, or bomb him out or whatever, right? So this is theoretically a superhero film that does the opposite of superhero films, and it's a musical that does the opposite of musicals, right? So it really is a kind of a spitting in the face of the audience in a way.
Yeah, well, it's something I was thinking. I mean, at one point I was thinking, who is this made for? And if anything, this kind of brought up in my mind the Megalopolis comparison again, because I thought this is only for the people who made it. As Megalopolis, I think, it's the film that is for Francis Ford Coppola, and if you like it as well, then you're welcome to the party. Like, and that is, I was going to say it's more of a risk with this. In a big sense it is, because it's this established IP and what have you. But Francis Ford Coppola was still spending $120 million on what some people are describing as a vanity project. It's a film that has a certain degree of opposition to its audience. So like, what would the fans of the first film want? Not a musical. You can't imagine they want a musical. You might be thinking that, what we did with the first film was something very different from what you'd expect from a superhero film, or film set in a superhero universe. It's really grounded in reality. Everyone was talking about how it copied Scorsese, essentially, from the 70s and things. And, it was extremely successful. So can that be done again? It kind of further experiment, be successful again. And there's a huge part of it which is attacking the audience for kind of liking the Joker character. So the Harley Quinn, or she's just called Lee in this character, who's played by Lady Gaga, I think is a real surrogate for the audience that loves the Joker, and kind of misreads him, and kind of places on him their own expectations or wants and that kind of thing. So when you come to basically what you have is the Joker character in this, not only getting killed at the end, but also owning up to his crimes. He gives up the stardom, he gives up the attention, he comes clean when he gives his closing statement in court. And he says, not only have I killed these 5 people, then I killed another. I killed my mother. No one even knows about that one. Like, this is how bad I am, and this is and he's very open about it. And she goes away. That's it. I've had enough of you, right? If that's not what you're going to give me, and that's the film telling the audience, this is what you're like. That's kind of what it's, right?
Yes, though of course, there's also another message there, which is that people need fantasy to survive at all, right? And that kind of, when you don't kind of engage with some kind of, fantasy, you die, right? So it's not to say that she doesn't have a point, that kind of, whilst you dream, kind of, things are possible. I did feel, though, that they showed that wonderful clip from The Bandwagon, right? What's the difference between this stage and that stage? It's all entertainment. And they begin to sing, that's entertainment. And I did feel for a moment, my God, I wish I was watching that film.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The musical numbers are interesting. So they're not original numbers. They're all kind of from the songbook to some extent. A lot of them are from musicals of the 50s and 60s. There's also
70s pop music.
Yeah, there's also I've got the soundtrack here. We've got What the World Needs Now Is Love. That's Bacharach.
Yes.
For Once in My Life, If My Friends Can See Me Now, Bewitched.
Yes, Bothered and Bewildered. That's from Pal Joey.
That's Entertainment.
That's from The Bandwagon.
When You're Smiling, The Whole World Smiles With You. To Love Somebody.
Yeah.
Which is unimpeachably great as a pop song. But there's and You're Gonna Build a Mountain, The Joker. So some of them from lesser known musicals as well. Like, the film is kind of conversant with. It's not just picking all the big hits.
Well, my question about the choice of songs was actually why, because some of them are from like the Great American Songbook, and some are from like 70s pop. And there's a Jacques Brel song at the end, Don't Leave Me.
If You Go Away.
If You Go Away, which kind of, you'd think if it wanted to engage with the audience, it would have picked, I don't know, songs from the 90s or the 2000s, or mixed some of those in, right? Or made it more rocky, or, I mean, I don't know what the normal, like the cultural nostalgia moment for an audience now is about songs from the past. But, the Great American Songbook in the 70s is way beyond, what I expect an audience to be nostalgic for, conversant with.
Yeah, I agree.
Though I love them.
That's it. I like hearing them, and I think they're an interesting presence in the film. But it's another thing where you're going, wait, did you have the audience in mind at all when you were making this? Like, did you think, wow, we need, this is such a big step, they'll come with us? Well, it's a risk for sure.
Sure. You know what? Like, kind of, I like them, and actually, Joaquin Phoenix, with his creaky, off-pitch voice, I actually loved, because the thing about Joaquin Phoenix is he was really acting out the song, and you really got a sense of a kind of interior state of being through his singing.
Yeah.
What I actually minded more was Lady Gaga, because I expected to hear some, beautiful singing or something, and that's not what happens,
No, I think they were talking about kind of having her sing more as the character rather than the pop star Lady Gaga, who is just like the most unbelievably talented singer, and kind of saying she wouldn't maybe breathe with kind of professional technique, and she wouldn't maybe hit the notes quite as well as she would. So she's not a bad singer, but she's not belting out the way you might want. I see their point. I think I would maybe like her to have been a bit better, though I think she was still very good. But and there's definitely a contrast between how well she sings and how well Joaquin Phoenix sings.
And I think they should have pushed it further, because I think the audience would have welcomed some great singing. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that there's only one number, in my opinion, that is actually a full number, which is when they sing Gonna Build a Mountain first time. It has a beginning, middle and end, and you hear the whole song, and it's a big production. Everything else is partially sung, or it's cut off early, that kind of thing. Like, so the filmmakers, before it came out, when people were talking about a musical, really, I think maybe Lady Gaga said this, saying, it's not really a musical. The characters just kind of, sometimes they sing about what they're feeling. I'm like, that's a musical. People are kind of afraid of musicals, and I mean, even The Greatest Showman, which became such a massive hit, was not really sold as a musical at the start. I watched the original trailer for it the other day, so when we saw it, I was going, no one told me this was a musical. When you watch that trailer, and there are a couple of shots in that trailer where people are doing kind of choreographed dancing outside of a theatrical setting, so but they blink and you miss them. The rest of it is like it's showman stuff. It's in the theatre, so you could easily mistake it for it's the show that is being put on in the film, sort of thing. So even that, which became massive, was not pushed as a musical until it was already starting to hit, and then they had a re-release. Then they had sing-along screenings and things. So they're really not pushing that here, but and even though they're saying they just sing about what they feel, you're just like, that's musical. It is kind of tempered the way it works in the film. It's not we go into a number most of the time. It's a number is kind of happening in some way. Sometimes it's real. You do hear other characters say that girl who was singing when they did that kind of not escape, but they go to the gates of Arkham, and she was singing, and then another character says she was singing. So that's real. But there's also obviously dream sequences, state of mind things, when he starts singing in the court, and then spotlights come down, there are no spotlights in the court, there's no backing band, so there is a mixture of reality and
which obviously is a reflection of Arthur's state of mind.
Exactly.
And which is very, very interesting on its own, but which does feel to me to be anti the genre, right? So even what you're saying about you never see the number fully, often, one of the things that I love in musicals is movement, right? And I was noticing, for example, how badly Lady Gaga moves, and then of course you think, well, that's probably intentional, she's meant to be an ordinary person, she's not meant to be a dancer. But then to me, you think in a musical, who cares? You want to have great dancing,
The point is to express. I mean, you're also ordinary people aren't normally singing. The point is to be expressive and different, and you sing and you dance.
I must say, the only time that I found her striking and convincing and a presence in the movie was the last scene where she had on that makeup, right? And there's something about the way that was shot that I thought that was marvelous, right?
The scene on the stairs.
On the stairs, yeah. The rest of the time, it's almost like she looked too ordinary for me, whereas I do think he is extraordinary. Just watching his body, right? Like, you know, that first scene where he's got these things jutting out of his back, and you see his
shoulder blades,
vertebra. Well, yeah, they're very distorted shoulder blades, and you know, he's got very pointy bones. I actually wonder if that was makeup or, you know,
no, I don't think so. I think he's unbelievably thin for this role. Yeah.
You know, but there was also the way that you know, there were bones jutting out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do when people are that thin.
All right. Okay. Okay. I suppose it's never been part of my experience to be that thin. But, you know, I thought he was marvelous. And the scene where he sings "Don't Leave Me," like in that broken, out of tune voice, I thought it was like wonderful, deeply like moving. I loved seeing it. And I loved the whole design of the film and the look. I mean, I remain unconvinced. So there's something, and this is going to sound weird, but I'm not totally convinced that Todd Phillips knows how to use the frame of the camera. So the film has like beautiful design, and there are some scenes that are very striking and that are rhythmically edited. So, you know, those scenes where they throw him in jail and then you see him, you know, through the box, right? And then the lights come off. I thought, you know, that was wonderful. And then you see like the courtroom scenes and you think, there's something odd about this composition. It's just like, it's not beautiful, it's not expressive,
I know what you mean. I had a huge problem with the cinematography in the first film on the basis that they're using these, I think it was Arri Alexa 65s, which is this kind of, you know, essentially a 65mm with sensor because it's a digital camera. And they're playing with this like very shallow depth of field that it gives you, and they were building these shots that feel big. That normally I really like that sort of thing. I really associate that kind of thing with Antoine Fuqua as well, like Training Day and the Equalizer films. Like he has this way of making things feel big on screen, but it felt purposeless, directionless. Like, and it felt like, oh, I've got this great camera. Let's play with the camera. But it, you know. Like, it felt like what I would do with that camera. Let's take some cool shots. But I don't really have a purpose behind them. I just like seeing... This, I think, was doing less of that. And everything felt more purposeful visually. But I do agree with you. I think it's not... Everything could be more interesting or more kind of expressive visually.
Yeah, there were some things that were so striking. Like, actually, almost those cabaret shots where Joaquin Phoenix is alone in the frame... And the way that he's lit and his makeup and so it looks fantastic.
Some of it is like really premium looking.
Yeah, and then you have those courtroom scenes, and you think, I mean, couldn't they have chosen different angles or moved the camera more, or just done something more interesting? Really, it felt kind of flat.
But there is, I think, it does give you, even if that's maybe not quite what they're going for, it does give you a very strong contrast between the Joker's imagined musical numbers, which are so bright and colourful, and you know the makeup on his face is bold and bright and stands out. When you compare it to what the courtroom looks like, what Arkham Asylum looks like, which is dour and dim and grey and green and brown. You could have
made both interesting.
Of course you can, but I'm just saying it does. Even if that's not the point, it does give you that contrast, which is a silver lining.
Sure, yeah, it does. You know, but that is one of the things to think about in relation to Todd Phillips, because you know some elements look just so striking and other elements look really flat, and it feels to me that the costumers, the makeup people and the set designers are carrying the director.
I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, he's not known as a visual stylist, right? So before Joker, he was directing like frat comedies. So Road Trip, which I really like. Old School, Starsky and Hutch, which I really like. School for Scoundrels, I'm not seeing. The Hangover, which I hated, and everyone was saying this is the funniest film ever been made. I thought, what the fuck are you talking about? Due Date, Hangover 2, Hangover 3, and then War Dogs, which was kind of interesting comedy drama about like two sort of stoner guys who
I don't think I've seen that.
Become arms dealers. It's Miles Teller and Jonah Hill. Yeah. I mean that was a funny movie and kind of interesting, but I mean it's not a film that you go, oh, I remember how it looked. Yeah. You know? But that's what he's known for. So you know, Joker, and that's one of the things probably that made me take against Joker a little bit. I'm like, who's this fucking, you know, boring frat comedy guy doing with all this money making an interesting looking film? Fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, well, whilst watching the film, I was thinking that the film didn't play. And by that I meant that I was finding everything interesting, and I love Joaquin Phoenix, and, there were, and he's always effective, right? But that the film gave you no emotional release, or indeed emotional connection, really. Yeah, so that kind of, you just feel that you're watching something that is intellectually interesting, but that is not, that I couldn't connect to. Yeah. So at an emotional level, the film didn't work for me at all. Even though I found it like super interesting at almost every instance, really.
The question of how interesting it is, I think we can overplay it, because I think what it's about is very clear. I mean, it's about stardom. It's about star chasers. It's about
mediatized celebrity culture.
Yeah, and fame, and the kind of the price, or the challenges of fame. Let's say. It's also about, I think, the difference in kind of. It's about the change in entertainment. I think one of the reasons at least, that classic musicals and classic songs from the songbook have been chosen, is that they draw a distinction between the kind of the entertainment of that era and the entertainment that is being played out, which is a live court trial about murder. Like, that is entertainment now, and that's what the crowds are turning up to see.
Sure. No, I get that, but it could have been better done. I mean, every time I saw the fucking, TV camera in the courtroom with the black and white picture, right?
Oh, I got it. I got the point of it.
Yeah, you got the point, and you could make it more interesting, right? Because it was always like that one big camera. Like, it wasn't even, they weren't playing with any other dimension of that, really. So
no, I think also the crowd. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, I think the idea is absolutely clear, but what they're doing with it, I don't think is that interesting, and what they have to say about it is not that interesting. I think a huge part of this film, kind of underneath everything, is the crowd. This is like it's about not just Lee, who is chasing the Joker, and as I say, it kind of plays as this sort of audience stand-in for people who love the Joker sort of thing. But it's also about the massive mob outside the courtroom every day, which we do see. But do we know any of these people? Right? Do we get a sense? Like, even when you're talking about TV, we see the trial played out on TV as seen by people in Arkham Asylum, where they're all watching it in the kind of mess hall, which you see that quite a few times because they all know the Joker, and we see it once in a shop window display with loads of TVs, where we see some members of the public watching this. That's it for what the public sort of, or any really effective sense of the public desire for the Joker, or the image, the way they take the Joker, all that kind of thing. And for a film that's really talking about audiences and their relationship to the stars, or what they see in them, that kind of thing, it's unbelievably thin. It's almost taken as read.
I mean, it's yeah. So on the one hand, we're saying it's very daring. On the other hand, it is daring, but it's also stupid. Yeah, so I think some of the things that people were saying about Megalopolis, I feel about this film. So it's daring in the sense that it's kind of a fuck you to the audience, really, in some ways. And it's going anti expectations in all kinds of ways. But then I think what it has to say is not very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then also it's not moving in any way, or I didn't find it moving in any way.
I think also that fuck you to the audience is heightened by the fact that I think you do need to remember the events of the first movie quite well to understand some of what's going on here, because they do recap that the murder of the TV host in that opening thing.
There's a poster of De Niro.
Yeah, like, and it's recapped in the animation, essentially. I mean, it's shown with this sort of Joker interiority, him versus his shadow thing, but it's the scene you remember. But if you don't remember the dwarf character, who the only reason I really remember, Yeah, Mr. Puddles. The only reason I really remember this is because I kind of reread the wiki of the first film before I got to see this one. Cause the reason I did it was because I thought I don't remember, but I think we may have slightly misread the end of the first film, because I wonder whether, because we took it very much as read what was happening at the end, where he jumps on top of a cop car and everyone's cheering for him, and I think we were saying, oh, that's kind of dumb, and I think maybe that was meant to be in his head more than I took it for. Anyway, that's the Wikipedia didn't help me with that. But it did remind me about, like the murder in the apartment where he murders one guy and he lets the dwarf go. It reminded me of his next door neighbour who he tries to pursue a relationship with, and both of these people turn up on the witness stand in the trial. I would not have remembered either of them had I not reread that Wikipedia page. The film is not going out of its way to help you.
Yeah, I didn't remember them.
So the film rewards that knowledge, and then it goes, but fuck you to the audience.
Yeah, so I didn't remember them at all. But I wondered about the scene with Puddles. You think, what's the purpose of it? Because the purpose of it is to say that basically Arthur destroyed his life. Yeah, so he let him live, but actually he destroyed his life. And then you think, okay, yeah, so you get that, and the actor expresses it very well. But then, what's the effect on Arthur and the Joker and on the rest of the film, right? So, because you do get some close-ups of Joaquin Phoenix where he's feeling something, but I couldn't quite detect what that was. Yeah, but I also don't see how it affects his subsequent behavior, how that changes.
I thought that made quite clear sense to me, actually. I mean, he's once Arthur starts acting for himself as his own advocate because he fires his lawyer. He's showy and performative, and he puts on that kind of "I'm just a simple country lawyer" voice, and he's taking the piss and everything. And then he's confronted with real consequences. Long last, obviously murdering people is consequences, but these are consequences that still live with this guy. I didn't kill you, but you live with fear every day because of this. And he suddenly doesn't have an answer to that, and it makes it real for him. It makes it more real or real in a way that it previously hadn't been. And that's when he starts to change, I think. I mean, if it weren't for that, I don't think we'd see him giving up, or rather taking responsibility at the end for what he's done.
Well, I get that as an explanation, but I didn't feel that watching it.
I did feel that, I think. Yeah. I mean, I did like that. I thought that scene played very well.
Yes, I like the scene, but I think, its effects on Arthur, which, if you look at the film as a whole, you could see, that being as one of the things that kind of makes him give up on the Joker in a way that then alienates Harlequin. But in the immediate moment, I didn't see it. I didn't think it was communicated effectively. And certainly it didn't have an emotional resonance at that moment, which I think it should have had.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that's personal. I for me, it kind of did. I mean, it was surprising to me, that scene. Right. I wasn't expecting something like that to happen, and...
Well, it could be that I just missed or blinked or, wasn't as attentive at that
But
moment.
I think sometimes it's not on your wavelength. You're not on its wavelength, and that it happens. Yeah. It worked for me. And because everything else in that trial has been showy and daft, and he's not been taking it seriously, or he's been mugging for the cameras and all that kind of thing. And this is the moment where he is shut up by that guy, and I felt it, And it's also the quality. Let me get the actor's name. Lee Gill as Gary Puddles. It's the quality of his performance that makes that work.
Yes, he's very good.
So it worked for me. I mean, there are lots of things about this film that kind of worked for me, and a lot of it I still think is rubbish and kind of slightly hacky. But I think it's I didn't respect the original film for taking risks in a way that I maybe could have. This film I do. Maybe it's the fact that it is so clearly sort of, if not against its audience, at least kind of not that interested in its audience. It's more interested in what it thinks is interesting and it wants to say and it wants to do. That I kind of like that.
I like that. I just wish it had done it better.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So, that said, I think it is also one of those films that is very, very interesting and does have many pleasures, right? And I'm glad that it exists, and I'm very glad that I saw it.
I'm glad. I'm glad it wasn't torture, which the first one was.
Well, on that note, thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.